Hello, everyone. Welcome to our annual COE retreat. Not advancing. Oh, perfect. Okay. We're excited to have you all here today and able to hold this event in person and over Zoom. My name is Dr. Allison Snow, and I will be the MC once again for today's event. I don't know if any of you were here with us last year, but we're very excited that it's not pouring rain because last year was a state of emergency. So I'm happy that the sun came out this morning. Just to introduce myself, I'm the Director of Community Engagement and Community Outreach for the Community Outreach and Engagement team, and I'm a Senior Director for Cancer Supportive Services. Before we get started, we will briefly go over some background for today's event. The theme of this year's event and retreat is Catalyzing Community Inclusivity, Enriching Cancer Research for Equitable Care. The mission of this retreat is a forum for discussions between diverse community, research, and education experts on how to create lasting and collaborative partnerships between researchers, providers, community, and faith-based organizations and patient advocates. These partnerships are important for building blocks in making progress at achieving equitable cancer care. We will start with some welcome remarks, a keynote speaker. We will have lunch with discussion groups. You'll see those tables set up outside. After lunch, we'll have a panel discussion and a performance from some of our patients before we wrap up. We will now hear a few introductory words to get us started from both Dr. Parsons and Melissa Mazur. Just to introduce Dr. Parsons, he's the director of the Tisch Cancer Institute at the Icahn School of Medicine. He's also the Ward Coleman Chair in Cancer Research. He's the director of Mount Sinai Cancer for the Mount Sinai Health System and the chair of the Department of Oncological Science at the Icahn School of Medicine. Welcome, Dr. Parsons.
Welcome everybody, and this is a really an important occasion to really bring everybody together for this day, our COE annual retreat. Just a few words about to put this in context. I have, in my different travels to other places to visit other cancer centers, often you'll find the scientists are somewhat isolated, the classic ivory tower, where they're really working in isolation and maybe don't really appreciate some of the problems, and often sometimes go down paths that are logical within a sort of a narrow scope, but don't have influence from their neighbors and people affected by cancer. And this can often lead to really sort of a lack of relevance, so to speak. So I think it's really powerful to actually learn from each other, and that's what the goal of this retreat is. And one thing is requires humility, because you really have to appreciate that you don't know everything. And one of the things I can tell you personally about my career in cancer is that you may know one thing really, really well, but it's such a complex problem that it goes from like the smallest atom to obviously whole communities, and none of us really have the time to really understand the full complexity. That's why it requires really this dedicated effort to be very inclusive and to learn from each other, but also to respect each other, because sometimes we can't learn everything. You have to sort of trust each other as well. So anyway, so I hope you guys have a really nice day today, and there's a really interesting schedule. I'm not going to go over that. Perhaps Melissa will be talking a little bit more about the schedule. But anyway, welcome, and look forward to an exciting day of mutual interactions. Take care.
Okay, now to introduce Melissa. She's the Assistant Director for Community Outreach and Engagement and an Assistant Professor and Nurse Scientist in the Division of General Internal Medicine.
Great. Hi, everyone. Oh, normally I can see the people on Zoom, but I'm assuming you're there, so hello. So it really is my great honor to have you all here. This is our third annual Community Outreach and Engagement Retreat, or COE, because we love our acronym, so I'm going to say COE. So we're really thrilled to have you all here, both in person and on Zoom. Appreciate everyone's flexibility to be hybrid together and to learn together. This gathering really serves as an important opportunity to reflect on our collective progress, to share insights, and most importantly, continue building stronger partnerships to help us achieve health equity in cancer care. So this year's theme is catalyzing community inclusivity, which is enriching cancer research for equitable care. It really aligns with our mission of engaging diverse communities, reducing disparities, and empowering individuals as active participants in the cancer research continuum. And I'm particularly excited about our today's agenda. So as I mentioned, this is our third annual retreat, and it's been wonderful to see the progress and growth that we have had every year. What we keep, we had our first one 3 years ago, and it was a wonderful way to share space and hear from the scientists. And we kept hearing, how are we going to be more engaged though? How are we really having conversations? Because to move this forward, we are all experts in this field, and it is about hearing from each other, providing safe opportunities to share and exchange our ideas, and collectively really grow and progress. And so which is really the true way of achieving sort of health equity. And so this year, it was a wonderful planning committee. So I just want to thank some of our members. So Asher and Tatiana, Tanisha Hill, Reverend Mimsy Robinson, Colette Smith, and Loreni, our health educator, along with a few other folks from our group. Thank you so much for coming together. And our community advisory board. So today's agenda is a direct reflection of what was the interest of our community advisory board and our greater community at large. So I really hope and encourage all of you to continue this conversation. Really take advantage of this opportunity that we're here together, both in this shared space, and then we'll get to break out into our lunchrooms and be in smaller tables. And really looking forward to honest and engaged dialogue and to hearing back from that dialogue, and we can continue to change as we move forward. So thank you so much, and looking forward to the day.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mazur and Dr. Parsons, for your wonderful introduction. We will now have a presentation. Our keynote is from Dr. Trishni Barosi on Our Nutrition Matters, the connection between nutrition, lifestyle, and cancer. Dr. Barosi is an assistant professor of nutrition at the University of Vermont. She is an associate member of the UVM Cancer Center, and her research focus is on improving food and nutrition security among young adults and other vulnerable communities at high risk for cancer. She is interested in how mobile technology and the active engagement of community stakeholders can be leveraged in nutritional interventions. So please join me in welcoming her for this exciting presentation. There will also be time for questions at the end that Dr. Sarah Miller will be moderating.
Good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
It's great. I'm very pleased to be here with you today on Zoom, and thank you for the introduction. I'm really excited to be with all of you today this morning. I am actually talking to you from Vermont today and would like to take a moment to acknowledge that our research occurs on land traditionally stewarded by the Western Abenaki. We recognize the ongoing significance of this land to their culture and also the historical harm that has been caused by European settlers. By honoring this history, we aim for a future that is just and also inclusive for everyone who calls this land home. as I'm reflecting and as we reflect on the significance of land and its histories, I'm actually reminded of my own roots in my home country of Mauritius. My dad is a farmer and a gardener, and he often shares this saying called "nous la terre, nous la mer nourrissent," which is in Mauritian Creole, which is actually my native language. And this translates to our soil and sea are our treasures. Food is a very deeply personal thing for me. It's part of our culture, it's part of our families and who we are. And growing up with this perspective has really profoundly shaped my understanding of all of the deep connections between nutrition, food access, and overall well-being. And it is something that I always have at the back of my mind, and a philosophy that I always try to strive in my own research. So as a researcher, my research program focuses on evaluating the determinants of food and nutrition security, and also generating evidence to guide interventions that address food security and nutritional support. In particular, my research examines community-based strategies to understand real-world challenges that are going and underlying food and nutrition security, and also to develop effective and culturally appropriate solutions for survivors of cancer and other marginalized communities. The theme of our gathering today is catalyzing community inclusivity and enriching cancer research for equity care. As I was reflecting on what this means to me and to all of us present here today, I wanted to touch base a bit on breaking this a bit down. And to me, that really means actively engaging diverse communities in the research process, and also ensuring their voices and experiences are really shaping the solutions that we are seeking. It also involves recognizing and also addressing disparities in access to care and also resources, while we are fostering collaboration among not only researchers, but also other stakeholders like healthcare providers and community members. And to me, ultimately, it's creating a more equitable system, especially those who have not been yet prioritized as much as we need to in research and in community outreach work and so on. And in my talk today, I will give a brief overview of what the latest evidence says about the role of nutrition in cancer prevention. I will also then discuss my research on two key aspects, mostly of the effort about how do we promote nutrition equity in the fight against cancer, what leads to behavioral changes in nutrition on the individual level, and also what I have learned from how we can effectively support these nutritional behaviors in our everyday lives, but also when we are looking at these different communities that are out there. Before I dive into some of my research, I would like to share some of the science behind the connection between nutrition and cancer prevention. Most of you must have heard of the saying, eat a rainbow, right? This is actually a good advice. You might have heard it very often. What does this mean is the different colors of fruits and vegetables actually come from, they have naturally occurring pigments in them. These different colors that we see, these are actually good for us. There is a name that we call them. These are called anthocyanins. And they've been a target of many studies actually due to the presence of some of the chemical compounds. In their chemical structure, we have certain components that can confer not only anti-inflammatory activities, but also we have some scavenging, and we can also have some anti-apoptotic properties as well. This is a complicated figure, but I'm gonna try to simplify it for you. What is my main point here is a lot of studies have been done with animals and human beings, and they do show that eating foods that have these naturally occurring pigments like red cabbage, tomatoes, and so on can actually be very good for your health. They can, like I was mentioning, they can help to fight harmful substances in your body. They can lower inflammation and also reduce not only the risk of cancer, but they've also found to reduce the risk of heart disease and brain problems. Other beneficial advantages of these components are also that they help to improve vision. They can also help with weight management and so on. One example that's coming to my mind is, tomatoes. If you've cut tomatoes, you've seen this reddish compound called lycopene. So lycopene, there's been a lot of recent studies that's been done on lycopene, and it's been shown that there's a strong relationship between lycopene and cancer risk reduction, particularly for prostate cancer. I also want to touch base on other food groups. While compounds like lycopene can offer impressive health benefits by fighting inflammation, there are also these other important food groups that we also need to consider when we are thinking of what is it that it is about a healthy diet that can reduce our risk of chronic conditions, cancer, and ultimately improve our overall well-being. As you can see from the picture here, I'm talking about legumes and beans, and specifically whole grains that provide essential nutrients, including fiber and so on. And you might see on the slide here, the American Institute for Cancer Research and the World Cancer Research Fund do state that eating at least 90 grams per day of whole grain actually can reduce the risk of certain cancers, and a lot of conclusive evidence has been shown in the case of colorectal cancer. And some examples of whole grains, you might be already familiar with this, such as whole wheat, wild rice, bulgur, which is also known as cracked wheat, and so on. What is the evidence behind eating whole grains, legumes, and beans? There is something that we have seen in a lot of studies at how these can really influence the colonies that exist, especially when we're talking about microorganisms in our gut microbiome. We have found that microbial degradation of whole grains and other food compounds such as legumes and beans that are rich in dietary fiber. So when we eat those, there are certain kind of metabolites that are released. These are called short chain fatty acids, and these can actually exert beneficial effects on the people who are eating them. For example, some of these short chain fatty acids can tighten some cells in the colon, and we can also help to preserve the integrity of the colon epithelium. And I like to, whenever I talk about these, I like to mention, but just like there are, bad and good colonies of people, or if we kind of make the relationship here is in our gut also, we have these good colonies of good bacteria and also bad colonies of these bacteria, and we want to eat things that elevate or propel the existence and the proliferation of these good bacteria in our gut microbiome. And this is what whole grains, legumes, and beans can do to our gut microbiome. Building on the benefits of whole grains and legumes, I also want to mention about another food group called cruciferous vegetables. We can enhance our health by adding another important groups of food called cruciferous veggies. There is a scientific name for them. It's called the brassica group of veggies, such as cabbage, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, and so on. And most existing evidence has focused on this unique compound found in these cruciferous veggies. There is a specific compound called sulforaphane, and this is found in a lot of cruciferous veggies, and it's been found that this compound has been recognized for its antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and chemopreventive effects on numerous types of cancer, including prostate, breast, liver, and colon. Whenever you are out there cutting cabbage or broccoli, you might smell this sulfurous compound. It smells almost like a fart, but it's actually good for us. After highlighting some of the health benefits of all of these food components that I just mentioned, I also want to spend a few minutes here and turn our attention on another dietary factor or lifestyle factor, namely alcohol consumption. Just as the foods we choose can influence our health, we should also consider our drinking habits. According to the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, a standard alcohol drink in the US contains around 0.6 ounces of pure alcohol, and this is generally found in, for example, 12 ounces of beer or 5 ounces of wine. While alcohol itself is not detrimental directly to our health, but there is a byproduct of it called acetaldehyde that can actually be very damaging, and it can bind with our genetic material, with DNA. It can also cause some cells to replicate incorrectly. So the current evidence suggests that as much as you can avoid alcohol, and if you must drink it, for women, it's recommended to limit 1 drink or less per day. And for men, it's recommended to have our limitation up to 2 drinks or less per day. While not all of you may have been familiar with the studies I just discussed, you probably already knew that vegetables are good for you. And as we all know from experience, being aware of that fact isn't really enough to make us start eating a healthier diet. And this problem is what my research focuses on, is how do we really get people to change their behavior with regard to nutrition? That question was my focus when I actually moved to the United States a decade ago. One of my first studies, as you can see from the picture here, focused on understanding what encourages or prevents women in rural areas of the US from eating a colorful variety of vegetables every day. And one of the major findings of this study was, while motivation, meal planning, and family support do play a significant role in how we can eat healthy, there was also these different barriers that shaped up, and one major factor was food access. Many of these women participants in the study faced a lot of challenges in obtaining fresh produce. So my point here is individual behavior is only part of a picture. Motivating people to eat nutritious food won't do any good if nutritious food is not available to them. I can personally relate to the challenges of accessing nutritious foods. I'm showing some pictures here from my childhood and my time in the garden. Growing up in Mauritius, there were many times when my siblings and I struggled to eat healthy due to our personal circumstances and limited resources. And later, when I moved to the US as a doctoral student, I vividly remember a summer when I had only $20 in my bank account, and I had to be incredibly resourceful to make that money last for 2 months while still trying to eat well. And I still had to excel in my research and in my studies. And these experiences have really deepened my understanding of the barriers many face when it comes to accessing healthy foods. These personal experiences with food access have not only made me very aware of how crucial nutrition is, but also for those who are facing health challenges. For cancer patients, access to nutritional support can significantly impact their treatment outcomes and their overall quality of life. And based on one of my studies, I found that nutrition support is actually a significant gap in cancer treatment today. A study that I led on colorectal cancer patients at a large NCI designated cancer center, we found that about 73% of these patients had iron deficiency, which is a marker of nutritional deficits that are going on. And over 80% of them didn't have access to any nutritional support during their treatment. While I'm also talking about cancer patients, I also want to mention food access in other vulnerable populations. Understanding the importance of nutrition in critical health situations such as cancer treatment can also help us really consider, who are the other vulnerable groups out there. So in my research, I focus on adolescents and young adults, including college students. And a significant part of my research looks at what are the challenges that these groups face, and how do we help them overcome these challenges. And I don't know how much this is going to surprise you, but alarmingly, up to 44% of college students actually struggle with food access, which can profoundly impact their well-being, their academic performance. It can also increase their risk of chronic conditions later in their life, including cancer. In response to these challenges, I initiated a satellite food pantry at Hofstra University, where I was a few years ago. And one of the studies that I looked at was how are these programs impacting students, not only their satisfaction level, but also their stress and overall well-being. And we found that programs like food pantries on campus, while they are not a long-term solution, but they can alleviate stress, empower students, and also foster a sense of belonging within the campus community. I'm getting to the end of my presentation here, and I wanted to touch base on what I was mentioning at the beginning. And I want to say that while initiatives like food pantries can be very crucial for meeting immediate nutritional needs, we actually really need a comprehensive approach to nutrition and health equity, especially in cancer prevention, as more and more issues are coming up. And really, we must focus on these different factors, such as how do we work together to help bring a patient-centered care approach to these different fields. And we have to look at these different factors, such as not only dignity and respect, but also how do we address stigma to food access? How do we initiate conversations even about stigma-related food access? How do we all work together? I really appreciated what Dr. Parsons mentioned at the beginning, that research should not be limited only to the ivory tower, but how do we share that knowledge and how do we bring about collaborations among different stakeholders? How do we even share power? And how do we address these structural inequities? And by integrating all of these elements, we can develop a framework that not only supports individuals in their nutritional needs, excuse me, but also promotes long-term health equity. And adopting this really holistic care approach can also help us look at not only the individual level, but also at these broader social determinants of health, where we can really look at effective, not only short-term, but also long-term effective cancer prevention strategies. With that, this is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for listening to me, and I'll be very happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much. That was such a fascinating talk. Apologies for my voice. I'm on the tail end of a cold, but I'm not contagious. So I have a ton of questions myself, but I'm sure that there are people in the audience who have questions as well. So, oh, am I muted? Can you hear me? Oh,
Yes, I can hear you.
Ah, perfect.
okay. Okay. And is there any questions in the chat?
Yes, I do see a question in the chat here. How can we measure the lack of access to nutritious food in a person? From Maribel, thank you for your question. That is a good question. There are different measures out there. The most commonly one that we've used in research is called the United States Department of Agriculture Food Security Module, which is, you can use, there is a short version of it, but there is also a long version of it. And depending on how much time you have with someone, you can adopt these questions. Having said that, in healthcare settings, I've realized that many times we don't have time to go through 10 questions or even 12 questions. So sometimes you might just have 2 questions, it can look like in the past 12 months, have you or any of your family members struggled to afford balanced meals? It can be simple as that. And then, you let the person tell you what's been their experience.
Dr. Sly?
Thank you. My name is Jamelia Sly, associate professor, and also associate director for DEI here at the Tisch Cancer Institute. Being that we are talking about community outreach and engagement, a lot of us are doing research and working and collaborating with people from different cultural backgrounds and what have you. And so, and with regard to nutritious food and access, I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to how we can incorporate aspects of people's culture into the food that people have access to, say in food pantries or with food boxes, to respect that portion of people's backgrounds, but also, offering opportunities for them to engage in more healthy types of eating.
Thank you. And Dr. Sly I thank you for your question. And I see that there was a question similar in the chat here. So that is such a good question. And that is something that I constantly think about in my research. I'm actually leading a USDA funded study right now to look at how do we look at institutional but also systemic ways to improve access to culturally relevant foods in food pantries. I don't have all the answers, but what I do know is that culture is such an important part of who a person is. Culture is a big influence of how our food beliefs shape up, how that translate into our dietary practices, how do we even connect with our social support or networks. And a few things come to my mind as to how we can move a needle. I think is how are we training the next generation of healthcare professionals who are gonna go out there and help, are gonna be actively thinking of culture as an important factor as we are delivering these services to whether it's patients or diverse communities out there. One thing that I do, for instance, is I teach a lot of dietetics students at University of Vermont, and I place a lot of emphasis on how do they become culturally competent healthcare professionals and how are we exposed to diverse ways of eating. I think that's very important. A lot of time I found that the US, they call it a melting pot, and there are so many different cultures and beliefs. But also at the same time, I found that people struggle to really understand how do these cultural beliefs or practices shape up in other diverse communities. So I think giving them as much as exposure and making, those trainings about cultural competency, even addressing things like implicit bias, I think is very important. How do we integrate that in the training of these future healthcare professionals? is very important.
Thank you. One question that I have for you, there's a lot of mixed messaging and maybe contradictory messages about what's healthy and what's not healthy. So, you know, carbs are good and carbs are bad, or do macros and you should have fat, you shouldn't have fat, all of those different things. Organic, not organic. How do you deal with combating all of this information that I think that most people are receiving on a daily basis, and what's your best advice for how to move forward to help people eat healthy?
That is such a good question. I think it's hard, you know, because social media, you'll find a lot of nutrition experts nowadays on social media and everywhere. And it's really hard to combat all of these voices and this messaging that we are being exposed to. I'll say, you know, the first step is talk to someone who has been trained, you know, whether it's your doctor or a healthcare provider, if you are seeing some kind of messaging that you may think it's good, but, you know, talking to someone who's actually has had training and who's studied it is very important, and get their insights as to, you know, I've seen that, you know, there is this new diet coming up. What's your opinion about it? So having those conversations is very important. And I would say, you know, it's hard because how much can we combat on social media, but also it boils down to, you know, how are we also digesting these as individuals. I think we need to be more, I'm blanking on the word here. We need to be more cognizant of how are we consuming all of these knowledge that are coming to us, and how are we making, you know, how are we filtering all of these messages that ultimately we can kind of really see, you know, what would be beneficial. And everyone is very different. You know, we cannot say that, you know, this messaging might be really bad for someone, this messaging might be good for someone else, but ultimately it's like, as an individual consumer, how are we filtering these messages and tailoring it to each our individual situation? I'm seeing some questions in the chat that I would like to take.
Yeah, sorry. Dr. Mazur was just reading one off. There's another question about whether it is important to eat organic food or not.
This is a great question, which I get asked very often. Organic fruits and veggies are good if you can afford them, but let's be real, not everyone can afford to buy. In some places, you know, organic produce costs, you know, twice or 3 times the price of regular produce. I would say if you can afford it, good. If you cannot afford it, that's not a deal breaker. As long as you are still incorporating a lot of these colors in your diet, you know, that's already a big win. If you're scared or you're skeptical of, you know, whether there are some pesticide residues on your fruits or veggies, you know, one thing that I do, I don't consume everything that is organic, but I make sure to wash all my fruits and veggies very well. I use a solution of water and vinegar, and I thoroughly wash all my fruits and veggies, which has been found to help, you know, making sure that you're cleaning those fruits and veggies very thoroughly before you consume them.
Very interesting discussion. But one thing I thought might be interesting to bring up also is on the cultural side, there's certain culturally in the United States anyway, there's certain groups that really just like a meat and potatoes diet. And I can, you know, these, even in my own family, and it's almost like salad is foreign to them, a green bean, they would not put it in their mouth. I'm just curious, like how it just, and these people have, you know, resources, they could eat better. How, why, first of all, is it something you have to do starting at a very young age, or like what are some solutions here? Because I just I find it sort of hard to believe that people still have such a monotonous diet and they're still walking around. But anyway.
Thank you for sharing your own experiences with, some of your family members. Like I mentioned, changing, I think one of the hardest thing that we do is changing behaviors, and that is so hard. I would say, you were right onto that these behaviors actually can be, if you try to change them very early on, during, infancy and childhood, they are more likely to be sustained in later adulthood. But what happens to those people who, who are already very well set in their ways, and you're trying to change their behaviors? That is very tough. What I have learned from my own work is work on very small changes. Don't try to change, let's say someone eats potatoes and meat. They are not going to change their meals if you tell them, I want you to stop eating potatoes and meat, and I want you to switch to roasted fish and roasted asparagus the next night. That would be maybe too much of a big change for them. So instead of thinking of removing from that plate, what can you add to that plate? So in addition to what we're already eating, which may not be as healthy, what can you add to that? Maybe there could be a roasted veggie that they might want to try, in addition to that potato and red meat. Maybe there is something else that could be added to that plate. Have conversation, what is a new veggie that you've been wanting to try, or what is something that you think might be healthy for you, but you've been reluctant to try, and maybe that is something small we can start with, and how can we add that to your diet? So starting small and then building on small successes is very important.
Thank you. I actually have another question I'm going to sneak in. I am curious, a lot of people within the last few years have been talking about the prices of food and how inflation has affected the prices of our grocery bills. Has this translated into the data where we've seen worsening of food insecurity and nutrition security in the last couple of years?
We've definitely seen a big rise in food insecurity in populations like college students. There are a lot of studies out there that have shown there's been a rise, especially after the pandemic, in food insecurity. I've worked with a lot of food pantries, like, for example, at the University of Vermont. And FYI, this is my opinion. This is not the opinion of the University of Vermont, but we've seen, a lot of, why I'm saying that is because I found that a lot of administrators are very, when I talk about stigma, a lot of administrators don't want to say openly that we have a problem on campus, because that signals weakness. And to me, that fuels stigma, actually, because people are not normalizing that there is indeed a problem related to food access. But going back to my early point, we've seen an increase in different populations. We don't have numbers in cancer patients, but we have seen that, current rates of food insecurity have ranged from 9 to 11% in national data sets that I have looked at. So there's definitely a problem. And food pantries, like I was mentioning, food banks, food pantries are in very big demand right now. We've seen a surge of people coming to food banks and food pantries. Food pantries have struggling to get food on the shelves because there's been such a great demand. One thing I think is, when I think about these broader systemic factors that can move a needle, is who are we putting in positions of power, who has those resources, and who can actually help these other safety net programs on the ground, like food pantries, who are actually doing, for lack of a better word, the dirty work. How do we fuel and give them more resources, or how do we create other programs, and who are those people in power who can actually give us those resources to make things happen?
Smith.
Yeah. Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for that talk. And I think my question actually leapfrogs off of your last statement very well. I think you made a case very nicely about how fresh fruits and vegetables can help with our risk reduction, particularly as we think about cancer. And it's not, and you shared your own story with us about the cost of food and food insecurity. And it isn't lost on me that it is easier for individuals and families to buy a Happy Meal, right, than it is to buy a pound of apples, particularly in places in urban areas like New York City. And so while I know that trying to affect policy on the bigger level and to change that, feels insurmountable, I guess the question I have is, how can we as a community, and what role can the Cancer Center play? What role can the academic health system play in partnering with our communities to really move the needle on that? And what suggestions might you have for us that we can take forward with us as solution-oriented sort of actions for us?
Thank you for your really meaningful question. I really appreciate this question. To me, I have a few thoughts about this. I think how do we move a needle is giving voice to the people that have not had a voice yet. A lot of times when we talk about these food issues, in my experience, and this is my experience. I don't want to share, but I won't say that this has been the experience of other people, but I've often seen that, it's people who may not have directly have a connection or experience with food access who talk about these kind of issues. Who are the people who are actively going through it? Who are the people who are actively serving these communities out there? How do we give them a voice? How do we give them a seat at the table to tell us and inform our work, not only as researchers, but also as healthcare providers? For example, food insecurity screening is not, is not a formal integration in a lot of cancer centers. How do we even make that happen? How do we have a system in place that can actively have conversations and have a screening in process when patients are coming to their providers? When these patients are coming to providers, how are providers even talking about them and make them feel seen and heard is a very important part to consider. I've seen some, I'm looking at one of the questions, the chat here, and saying, do cancer centers have food pantries? Unfortunately, not all of them have it. It's a very new way of thinking about food access. The UVM Cancer Center doesn't have one, but we do have one at the UVM Children's Hospital that serves food to the adolescent and young adult survivors of cancer. But it's not, it's small, it's on a small scale. So how do we even find resources? A lot of time I found that, even having these conversations with people in the higher up, people are very reluctant to hear, if I'm saying, oh, based on my research, less than 20% of cancer patients are getting food assistance or nutrition support. I receive blank stares, or I receive, awkward smiles. So I would also like to know the answer, when I talk about these things, how are people in the higher up, receiving these answers, and how can they be more receptive? How can we make them more receptive in hearing us when we are talking about these issues? Is something that I'm also actively thinking about.
Thank you. There are lots of questions in the chat. One question is, can you provide examples of foods that may not be widely recognized for having potential cancer-causing ingredients?
Yeah, that is a very good question. A lot of times as a nutrition researcher, I realized that things that I think everyone knows, not everyone else knows that. So my apologies in advance if this is something you already know. But one type of, it's not really a food, but maybe it stems up from cooking practice. I see, but a lot of time people do barbecues, or even right now we have these air fryers that have come up. So one, while air fryers or doing a barbecue itself is not bad, but the way you cook food can actually be harmful. I've done some research on how exposure to cooking fumes or the presence of certain charred materials, the black, that looks like almost like a charcoal burn part of your food. These are called heterocyclic amines, and these can actually increase your risk of cancer. So make sure that, the way you're cooking your food also plays an important role. You might think that, oh, I'm eating veggies, this is good for me. But then if it's charred or there are these compounds forming on the surface, these are not necessarily good for you.
Thank you. I didn't know that. So not gonna note that for myself. Okay. Has there ever been, or could there be, a program for success to food for cancer patients specifically? I think you spoke a little bit about this, about speaking about the pantries in the cancer centers. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
I would just say that we need more funding and resources because these pantries are also struggling.
Thank you. And then another question is, how do you ensure sustainability of access to healthy food in vulnerable patient populations? And I know in your talk you had said, talking about the pantries in the college setting, like this isn't a long-term solution. So how do you ensure that type of sustainability?
I think it's it's like a big question, but to me, again, going back to how are these different actors come together in making that happen. It's not only, at the healthcare setting, but who are these other important actors in the community? For example, if a patient comes in for, there's 2 questions that have been screening them for food insecurity, and we see that this particular person is having some issues with food access. That doesn't end there. There are more steps. Whatever other people that we can work with to bridge the gap in making in making sure that we have access after their healthcare appointment, that we are connecting them to a certain resource, and there are these other people who are stepping in, these other stakeholders who are stepping in to make sure that this person is going to have access not only to these resources, to these safety net programs, but also they're going to have a sustained process in making that happen, in making this a reality for them.
Yes, Dr. Mazur.
So I'm encouraged by this discussion around, thinking about what we can do, what are some action items, how are we moving the needle? And, when you mentioned cancer centers having food pantry, Sarah and I looked at each other like, ooh, maybe that's a good idea. But something that I hear often from the community too, and I think this also relates to the behavior change piece of it, is like, all right, we hear often, we know vegetables are good for us and these are good for us, but why? Like, what is the underlying reason? What is the science behind it? So I think like really sort of like providing like a deeper education and sharing the science in a way that people are understanding what's going on at that molecular, that biological level. And I'm just curious if you know of programs that have been successful and disseminating the science around it to kind of on a wider community level. How are we sharing this information so it really is accessible and it also relates and I think can motivate for behavior change?
Yeah, that is a great question. One of the cancer centers that I know have been doing some work around that and making, how are we making these information digestible and also accessible to different groups is the MD Anderson Cancer Center, I think in Texas, if I'm not mistaken. I've often seen that they have these like bite-sized information about, what can you do, or what are some foods you should avoid while you're on treatment as a cancer patient, or what are 5 things, you can do, or what 5 things can you incorporate in your diet as you're on this journey. So there are some cancer centers who are doing it out there. I don't know how much is that being translated? Whether there's someone who's been doing research onto how effectively these conversations or how effectively this messaging are coming across. I think that would be a great research study for someone to do. And yeah, I think that's a great question that you ask.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Yes.
So I'm just curious about the increased prevalence of colon cancer, especially in younger individuals. So I'm 22. And I think it's a little concerning because they've been seeing like 20-year-olds start developing this, and it's potentially, a systemic issue with the food that we're eating. But then it also raises the question like, oh, should people start getting screened earlier? Like, kind of how do we combat this issue? And so I was just wondering if you can expand on that a little bit.
But it's a good question. I think there are different factors in play here. First of all is how, what before we are diagnosed for colon cancer, like you're saying, what is happening in the early stages. I think that is very important here. A lot of, if I take into consideration, your question made me think of my own home country of Mauritius. 2 decades ago, we didn't have a high rate of cancer, but now, we've seen a high rate of cancer, especially endometrial cancer and colon cancer in Mauritians, which we didn't used to have. And some of it has to be, with the advancement of technology and medical healthcare systems where we're able to more actively identify these, but also I think a huge part of it has to do with a change in how are we eating and how our lifestyle have changed compared to a few decades ago. In my home country, people used to have more active lifestyle. People used to work in like the fields, and like my dad is a farmer and a gardener, but here I am. I'm a professor, so this is a drastic change. And if I have to compare my lifestyle to my dad, I do eat pretty well, but I would say, I'm not as active as my dad is because of his job. So I think that certainly shapes up. There is something called nutrition transition, which is a term to, it's an epidemiological term to capture the shift of the shift in diet from more traditional food systems towards more westernized diets. And I think that is not, oftentimes people talk about nutrition transition when they're talking about developing nations or middle income countries, but I think it's also a real thing. In the United States, there has been a shift in how people are eating, how people are even accessing food, how their lifestyle have changed. And I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, just a brief comment. You mentioned as a child, you had the benefit of having a father who was a farmer and a gardener. So we actually saw vegetables and fruit being grown. And I just wanted to mention, because I was wondering whether that exists in other places, there is an initiative here called Harlem Grown. And it started by educating children in actually growing vegetables in a little park, which became a garden. And this organization has 14 farms in Harlem. And I'm wondering whether you're aware of any other initiatives that contribute to educating children at this early stage through getting them close to actually the produce and what it means.
Thank you for this observation. I think Harlem Grown is a very meaningful initiative, and it's one of research has shown that exposing kids to an early age to gardening does promote them to promote healthy attitudes or positive attitudes towards consuming it as from during their childhood, but also later on. Other initiatives that I can think of, I know that there's been some research done on how can you actively incorporate children in daily meal prepping, in cooking. I know there is a safety aspect here. People would say like, I'm not gonna give my child a knife to cut my veggies. But at the same time, if there is a plastic knife, I've been in sessions, I've participated in sessions where I had some cooking fun sessions with children, and we played with some plastic knives, and we cut these veggies in colorful shapes and forms. And then, they kind of saw like, how do we even prepare, a nice little salad? And I found that a lot of the children were more motivated to eat those foods that, they might not have been incentivized to eat, because a lot of the efforts went into the meal prepping, the meal planning, cutting of these, and how do we make it fun? A lot of time behavior change. There are these aspects of how do we make it easy, fun, and popular. That's like these three central components at the back of my mind when I think of how do we make people from an early onset eat healthy, how to make it fun, how to make it easy, and how to make it popular. So if we try to incorporate these aspects, I think not only for children, but also, someone asked, how do I make these people who are very set in their eating habits, who are only eating meat and potatoes? So those are good things to consider at the back of your mind when you're thinking, how do we make people change their diet, or how to make them more interested in at least thinking about how to change or improve and making these small changes.
Thank you so much. This was such a wonderful talk. I just, on behalf of myself, TCI and COE, we want to thank you for this incredible talk. I think it's clearly something that has interested this community. So we really appreciate your perspective. Yes, I think we are. Oh, yes. And I think we got most of the chat questions, but if there's any other remaining questions, if you want to answer them in the chat, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciated all your questions, and thank you for having me. This was such a great time with all of you.
Okay, all that talk about food, it's now time for lunch. So thank you again, Dr. Barossi and Dr. Miller, for that wonderful presentation. We will now move on to our lunch session. During this time, we will have several tables set up for the discussion groups. They are listed on the slide. The purpose of these discussion groups is to provide the retreat attendees with opportunity to talk about these relevant topics and learn more from one another in a more direct forum. We hope you have a chance to look at the topics and think about which table you might like to choose. We have table cards set up on a table right outside next to where your food will be, and you can grab your food and then find yourself to your table. We have 12 seats per table, so hopefully we have enough spots for everybody. And then we will regroup back in about 40 minutes. Oh, also just a reminder, there will be somebody who can be a moderator in each group to report back. So we'll have one person report back when you come back into this room. The Zoom will be divided into breakout rooms for discussion as well if you're interested. So we'll see you back at 12:40. Thank you so much. How was it? It's good. At least you got
Hi, so this is Lena Agenda for Group 7, the Zoom group. I don't know, can you all hear me? Because everybody's on mute.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you, Lena.
Great. All right, I guess I just heard that they're going to break us into 2 groups, but I think we can start. So I'm Lena Jandorf. I direct the Office of Cancer Community Outreach and Engagement for TCI. Have been doing community work in predominantly East and Central Harlem initially, but now throughout New York City with a wonderful, wonderful team of health educators, one of whom is Natalie, who will be taking notes for us today. And I'd like to introduce my co-coordinator, Getty Arniella.
Thank you, Lena. I'm Getty Arniella, Director of Community Health and Outreach at the Institute for Family Health. We're right down the street from Mount Sinai on 119th Street and Madison. And we also have a network of health centers throughout New York City and the Mid-Hudson Valley. And I'm happy to be here with Lena to help moderate this session. I guess we're going to start by, it seems like we're a much larger group than we thought.
Actually, it's smaller than it got smaller again. So I think the first task was to really just go around and very quickly just give your name and affiliation. I'm going to take 5 minutes for that, so we have enough time for the discussion. If it takes longer, we can just put things in the chat. But I'll go down the list of participants and try and do it in that order. So Adriana Rossi, just, I guess I gave your name, your affiliation. You're on mute. Can people come off mute?
Lena, just to jump in here, I'm wondering if folks are like grabbing food quickly as well.
Oh,
You mean
that's
at
a good
home?
point,
I don't
Natalie.
know.
So you were able to get off mute.
I think what Natalie is trying to point out is that maybe folks took a few minutes to go get something to eat as well, Lena.
Okay. Well, let me just, looks like Devora Clintonek. I'm sorry if I really messed that up.
That's fine. I'm Devora Klatanek. I'm a professor of computer science at Brooklyn College and a member of the Brooklyn College Cancer Center. And I know computer science doesn't usually fit with cancer research. So I just want to say that I am working on a project to investigate software design for cancer survivors, especially those with impairments. And if we have time, I'd love to talk more about that and our challenges in recruitment.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, we work with Brooklyn College a lot. So welcome. Jeremy Chiffon.
Hi there, I'm Jeremy Shatton. I work in the Office of Development at Mount Sinai as part of the Development Communications team. We work on a lot of proposals for TCI and cancer research in general. So it's just fantastic to learn more about this aspect of TCI.
Thanks. Glad you're here. Nancy Reckline.
Rockline, it's easier to say than spell.
Yeah,
Hello,
it's also the print is very small, so I'm just trying to read it.
worries. I'm Nancy Rockline. I am a nurse practitioner down at the Chelsea Cancer Center working in a breast medical oncology practice. I earned my PhD at the CUNY Graduate Center in 2023, and I did a grounded theory study on breast cancer decision-making to keep it sort of simple. And I'm now trying to find my place as an experienced clinician and a novice researcher.
Great. I should mention Natalie is trying to also capture everybody's name, although I guess you can get it from the site also. Thank you. Maribel Vargas, my friend from ACS.
Hi, Maribel Vargas from American Cancer Society, and we are very invested in research and health equity. Thank you.
All right, Terry Glassman.
Hi, I work with the Community Advisory Board as a patient advocate. I'm also a multiple myeloma patient being treated at Chelsea.
Thank you. Nordia Morrison Sadler, and I also see you have your hand raised, so
Yes,
I'm not quite sure if you have a question or just introduce yourself.
No, someone just suggested that perhaps you raise your hand if we're here. My name is Nordia Morrison Sadler. I work with the Tisch Cancer Institute as a project manager, and I just like to take advantage of any educational opportunity just to learn more. So that's why I'm here.
Great. Chrissy Marr.
Hi, everybody. My name is Chrissy. I'm currently a graduate student getting my master's in public health at the CUNY School of Public Health. And I actually work with Lena in the community outreach and engagement team, helping out with health educators and as well as working on some research projects with the team.
Thank you. Adriana Rossi. Still not here. Fred Hirsch. Kristen Monkhouse.
Hi, everybody. My name is
I heard
Christine
you said
House.
Fred
I
Hirsch.
am the
I'm here.
founder of Patient Orator, and we help people become better communicators for their health and social needs. And I'm very glad to be here.
Oh, wonderful topic. Fred, I'm sorry, I just heard you.
Yeah, I'm on Zoom though.
Yeah, so just introduce yourself and your affiliation.
Okay, I'm Fred Hirsch. I'm a medical oncologist. I'm leading the thoracic oncology program here at Mount Sinai.
Thank you. Cassandra Panzano. Nahal Mohammed. Christopher Woodrow.
Hi, my name is Chris Woodrow. I'm a palliative care physician at the Department of Geriatrics and Palliative Medicine, and I am a researcher, and I'm excited to be here to see about community engaged research in the Cancer Center.
Okay, there are just two more, and then because I do want to get to the questions. Rashimi Unawani.
Hi, I'm a project manager at Tisch Cancer Institute, sorry. And I'm here to gather as much information with community outreach project.
Thank you. Dr. Max Sung.
Hi, I'm a medical oncologist in solid tumors at the Tisch Cancer Institute, and interested in engaging diversity and minority group participation in clinical trials. So I'm eager to learn what the efforts are being done to engage this group of patients.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Getty for the first question.
Yes, what a wonderful group, very diverse, and clearly everyone that's here is interested in doing community engagement. So we came up with a few questions that maybe we could entertain to start with, and then if anyone would like to add something that you'd like us to talk about, I think we may be able to have some time for that. So the first question that we thought we could talk about is, what are some effective methods for identifying and understanding the needs and concerns of a specific community? So if you're, working with a specific community, how do you start to understand and identify the needs and concerns that they have? Anyone like to start?
And I think because I'm just, we can't see each other because I kept this slide up. So I think, we'll just be as polite as we can be as we jump in on each other. But the first person who might want to answer Getty's question, effective methods for identifying and understanding the needs of specific communities, particularly those of you who are out in the community. What do you need for us as Mount Sinai, for example, or the Institute for Family Health to best understand what's going on in your particular community?
Don't be shy now. I know some of you may be having your lunch, so it's hard to chew and talk at the same time. One of the things I was thinking about, we do a lot of work in East Harlem, which is known as El Barrio because it's really Spanish Harlem. And so, what are the needs of a community like that? How do we help identify, how we can go into a community like that to figure out what will work to engage that community and get them interested in, in being involved in research potentially. Any thoughts?
Well,
So
I'm
this
thinking
is
about the, oh, sorry.
Yes, Jeremy, let's go. Jeremy and then Nancy.
I was just thinking about the Robert Smith Mobile Prostate Screening Program. I know one thing they've done is gone into the communities where people gather, whether it's church or community centers, and try to get to know people there through the leaders of those communities and figure out how can we reach you about prostate cancer screening. It's a very specific topic, but then it starts to expand out to urology and health and wellness in general. So I think that's one way. You have to start somewhere. You have to find where the people are instead of trying to get them to come to you, especially in the early stages of a community.
Yeah, and Jeremy, that pertains, I mean, obviously to the wonderful prostate ban, but to any, how do we talk about colorectal cancer in appropriate way, et cetera? So somebody else want to add to Jeremy is, kind of the Mount Sinai experience, but I'm going to call on you, Maribel, and how, ACS works with so many different communities, as I know you do, with the different healthcare systems. Anything you could add to this discussion?
I think just being part of different community groups is important locally. In that way, we can kind of capture the needs locally. Each zip code has different needs. Some people might need more transportation barriers. Other ones might need more childcare barriers, and other ones scheduling issues for different type of tests because they're schedules. But something that have worked in our advantage is to try to be in these community groups locally to hear what are the needs locally and try to implement another group of people who can just address those needs by kind of almost zip code.
Right. And one thing that, thank you, Maribel. One thing that Jeremy touched on was to identify community leaders, right, that could be helpful in engaging the rest of the particular community. And then having things like a prostate vehicle that can actually go to the community versus trying to get them to come in to, the institution is a wonderful resource. Nancy, you had something you wanted to share?
So I had really a question, sort of along the lines of the prostate cancer question. So what I've observed as women make choices about breast cancer surgery, that different cultures approach it differently, and values and preferences obviously come into healthcare decision making. But I've noticed some women in mostly the Hispanic community struggle with those choices and seem to be very influenced maybe by their partner's views. And I just was curious about how those kind of questions might be addressed.
That's fantastic. I'm going to just move us along. I'm just kind of trying to be cognizant of the time so that we can get to, we have 3 questions. And as Getty said, we'd like to be able to open it up to other thoughts. So our next question, and our colleague from Brooklyn College may be able to help on this one. How can technology and social media be used to create and strengthen virtual communities with shared interests and goals?
I'll jump in on that one. I'm the patient advocate, and I do a lot of outreach, and I started a support group with the International Myeloma Foundation. And I have to tell you, I'd say 80% of the people in our support group came from a Facebook group specifically for myeloma. So perhaps someone at the hospitals and or different cancers or research centers looking for groups like that and having a patient advocate. You can't really be the physician or researcher, but a patient advocate kind of engaging people and educating people.
Oh, I like that idea a lot. Jeremy, could you respond to that? I mean, are you aware of what we're doing at the Tisch Cancer Institute?
With the prostate ban or other issues?
No, with technology and social media.
Oh, I haven't actually heard much about that, to tell you the truth.
Okay.
But
All
it should be done.
Well, we do have a Facebook page, and I know, Natalie, one of our health educators, is on the line, and we do try to have a small social media presence. I think we post on Instagram and Twitter periodically, but I think, I don't know, Natalie, I think you'd agree with me that we could do more. I know you're working on a website, actually.
Sorry, I was
Believe
trying
it or
to.
not, I just had a thought about this actually. When you think about younger cancer patients, especially, using something like Discord. Discord is a huge social media platform for younger people. I use it myself. It's a private community building tool. And, there's communities for so many different subgroups and topics that people can really feel free to talk about stuff that they might not talk about elsewhere, connect with people very widely across the country, around the world. It's a really good platform.
What's it called?
Discord.
That's a wonderful suggestion. I'm wondering if anyone has any thoughts about older folks that aren't so tech savvy and, how can we reach them?
I can actually jump in here if that's okay, and I can talk about my own personal experience with social media and trying to connect with like older tech savvy members of my family. So for example, like I'll take my grandmother for example, like she's not on Instagram, she's not on Facebook, she's not on Twitter. And so a lot of the time it's a question of how am I going to get this information to her. Thankfully, I am a health educator, so I can like give her that information. But what's also been helpful is, if I'm on Instagram and I see like someone posting about information about like mammograms or whatnot,
Yeah.
I'll say like, hi grandma, like I just saw this on Instagram, let me text it to you. And I think a lot of the time we think about how to like directly interact with specific populations or like sending that information or like making it available to those specific members of like, our target audience. And if they're not tech savvy, it is really important to see like for those of us on social media, having something that says, send this to, your family or send it to your friends who may not be on social media, because a lot of people think, oh, like this may not apply to me, but it could apply to someone else. And I think it's really important that when we use social media that, we make it a point that if you're seeing this, don't just digest it for yourself, also involve your, friends and family members who may not be seeing that information on. And I think a lot of the time, we may miss that on social media as well. So I just wanted to make that point if for those of you who may be utilizing social media to spread health information.
Yeah, and thank you, Natalie, for that. And Maribel mentioned short videos. I mean, if we could get videos out to older folks, that's a great way to get information out and and to help them to learn about resources or issues that they should be looking out for. Any other thoughts?
So, so I recruited my study population mostly from Facebook groups. Of course, I had to ask for permission. They're very protective groups, was my sense of things. So I'm not sure how easy it would be to get a patient advocate into those groups, but I think it's a great idea. And the other thing is, which has been mentioned before, you kind of meeting people where they are. So I'm thinking that, libraries and churches and such are probably where to meet older adults. Although now as an older adult myself, I'm saying that older adults are more tech savvy, for example, than like my parents were, for example. But my mother always went to the library and she learned how to use the computer there. So that may be a way to reach that group.
Good for
Yeah,
her. Yeah.
I would like to add or echo what Jeremy said. We need to come out to the communities and not the opposite. And the only way we can do that is interact with leaders, interact with the environment. the communities have different locations and social events and social mechanisms. Religious communities, they have a church, they have a synagogue, they have social arrangements, and I think it is important to come out there and interact with the environment where they are.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Jeremy,
Fred, it
think
sounds, I'm sorry, Lena. I
Yeah.
was gonna say, Fred, it sounds like, you think that social media is important, but that to be out there and actually, being involved in the different organizations that have a lot of members, right? A lot of access to the community, is a really important thing to always do, right?
Yeah,
Thank
and I was just going to add that it really echoes what Dr. Parsons said. You know, we have to, as researchers at Mount Sinai, we have to get out of our ivory tower and really see where people are, whether they're, we're talking about cancer prevention or cancer treatment. We just can't sit in our offices. So that's really a great point, everyone.
Yeah, and Lena, I think that's an important point to help the higher ups that kind of sort of hand down to us kind of the work that we should be doing. Because I remember years ago I was working at a hospital that closed, and I was talking with the president of the hospital about going out into the community and helping people understand about health disparities and how to stay healthy. And he said to me, well, why don't you just all invite them all here to the auditorium and we could talk to them? And and I thought to myself, oh my God, like he's a president, he's great at it, but he has no clue how to engage the community or work with them, right?
Oh gosh, I haven't thought about North General in a long, long time.
In a long time. Well, it's always on my mind,
All right, I'll ask, and I'll keep this one short because I do want to have time before we have to wrap up and be finished by 12:40. The third question we had put together, all of this is really important. And how do we maintain the relationships once we create them? So how do we really, keep engaging with, these great ideas to get out into the community? How do we sustain them? Any thoughts on that?
I think that's a hard one. This is Terry, the patient and patient advocate again. That's a hard one. Like, I also coach for a group called Health Tree. And when people are new to a diagnosis, that's really when they need the help. And after a while, once they're in the rhythm, once they're have a little bit of control, because it's all about control, right? The loss of control and feeling like you have some control. So I think that you have to meet them where they're at and just kind of use the older people to help engage newer people, because you're not going to, I don't know, but personally, and from what I've seen, the longer you're in it, people start wanting to help other people. So having some kind of a cohesive group that the older people will help the newer people will keep the people who are there longer engaged and maybe bring some newer people in. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that's what patient advocates really, you are or have gone through what a new patient might be now experiencing. And I think some of that peer-to-peer work can be very, very, very helpful.
Lena, one thing which I don't think has been mentioned is many of those communities, they have their community newspaper or news magazines or whatever they communicate, not on social media, but as a matter of fact, they have a real newspaper or a real news magazine or something. And I've been aware of that most recently, and there are hospitals and there are doctors who present research and research opportunities and collaboration opportunities through articles in those media.
Yeah, we've actually been trying to do that in some work in the Russian-speaking community, as well as the Chinese community, various communities throughout the city. Let me now, again, because we have 5 minutes before we have to wrap up, and I've been taking some notes. Thank you, Terry. I saw it in the chat. What questions haven't we asked that you think would be important in the area of, again, community outreach, community engagement, and sustainability?
Lena, one thing that I find is that there's so much fear in communities of color, Black and brown communities. Like oftentimes I hear, "Oh, I don't want to go get screened. I don't want to go to the doctor because I don't want to hear what they might find or what they're going to tell me." And so, I always find that daunting. Like, how do we help people get beyond that fear so that, because in essence, if something is found early enough, it's so much easier, and they will suffer less than if they don't go and get screened and wind up at a much further stage of cancer, right?
Yeah.
So what can we do to help people not be so afraid and to be willing to get screened and get, just get help?
Yeah, like yourself, we really try, and I'm fortunate to have a very diverse group of health educators that come from the communities we're trying to reach and who are culturally and linguistically matched. So, we have fortunately a wonderful health educator, Nadia, who is Russian speaking and lives right in the Russian community. We have a Mandarin speaker, French and Spanish, and I think I got them all for now. But there are others. That's kind of where we're focused. I hope in the new year, if budgets get approved, to add perhaps a Korean speaking health educator. So I think it's also, when we talk about meeting people where they are, we have to think exactly what you're saying, Getty, about what are the different cultural, and that's come up a couple of times in this conversation. And importantly, I think fear increases when you don't speak the language of the provider.
Right.
Whether you're working through a translator or, unfortunately, parents or grandparents bringing their children who are now bilingual, that can increase fear as well. Great question. I think mistrust comes in. For some cancers, stigma comes up. So, yeah.
I find that, go ahead.
I was just
Jeremy.
going to say, I think it's important. I'm not a provider myself, but I would recommend that providers are educated on things like collective trauma around like the Tuskegee experiments, which have affected generations of Black people feeling like they're, lab rats or they just have to, they were very poorly treated in that situation, and understanding how that can infuse people's views of the medical system. There's other ones. Henrietta Lacks was
Yes.
also exploited. And then there was that doctor who did so many important gynecological experiments on women without anesthesia, mostly Black
Yes.
women. So
Yes.
understanding the context of where that mistrust is coming from,
Right.
is I think critical to bridging the gap.
Yeah, I was going to say, Jeremy, I think, Lena's right to have, folks working in the communities that are like the communities they're working in. But, if after working in Harlem for 20 years, I find that the Black community, because of the things that you mentioned, are much harder to really gain trust with and to sort of get the message across about the importance of screening and, to avoid like illness that is at a point where it's very difficult to treat, you know. So, you know, after all this time of working in the community, I really find that still difficult. And also with men, Black men, you know, they are just so difficult. I think the prostate vehicle has been a wonderful, wonderful addition to the resources that Sinai has for
Yeah.
helping. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just say one, which I think is really interesting. We have a researcher in the behavioral oncology group who has studied and now educates providers, particularly with women undergoing gynecological procedures and cancers, about if they were sexually molested as children, that PTSD, again, we talk about collective trauma, but individual trauma that can also impact. And if you can educate the providers, they can be more sensitive to those concerns. So great. I'm going to try and sum up in the last 4 minutes. So hopefully I captured everything. And I'll just kind of hit the highlights. I think from the point of how to increase outreach, I think the comment about local community advisory boards, the city council, every neighborhood has. I actually just spoke to a group of them on Friday, and to get to the local level and what they need, I think it would be really helpful. And again, which just keeps coming up, is going out to the community, not just staying in our offices, but really leaving our ivory towers.
Yes, and also, Lena, don't forget the importance of identifying community leaders that can provide access to others, right?
Yep. And that actually, kind of goes into a little bit of the issue of media, and that came up, that Fred brought up about local newspapers. Also, we did, Naji just did, we do hepatitis B screening out in Brooklyn on a local radio station. We've also done that, a French radio station focused on African-born immigrants around the same topic. So those are great ways. As far as media, I learned about a new platform, and thank you for putting it in the chat, called Discord. So there are different methods, different levels of social media that we all. Well, I'm not on social media at all, but I think it is at different age cohorts, that different types of. We did, I think it was 2 years ago, the health educators did a wonderful short video on Instagram about breast cancer screening. And maybe we'll have to try and recreate that and get that posted. And as far as, again, technology and social media, it's going out, but, so many of the New York City public libraries have health education programs. So I think getting out there, I'll just mention that hasn't come up in reaching the older communities. We try to get to a lot of the senior centers and get the message to them, and for them hopefully to bring it home to their children and grandchildren. Sustainability is, I think, one of the greatest challenges of the work that we all do, whether it's research and then you find something that works, and how do you implement it and keep it going. Again, I think Terry was one who said, meet people, particularly patients, where they are. And so again, it's really getting out there. And then I think an important topic that came up was the issue of fear, medical mistrust, stigma, which affect different communities, particularly Black and Brown communities, are really, a challenge. Language barriers in the different communities. I think Queens is one of the most diverse. I think it was, I forget how many hundreds of languages are spoken. So really, it can be a challenge working in that borough. And then being aware of trauma, whether it's collective or individual trauma. did I hit the highlights so that we can do the report back, or any other comments? And hopefully they'll all come back in a minute, but we're right on time here. So anything Getty or I have missed or we want to add before they bring the whole group back? Well, I'll just say this has been wonderful for me. I mean, again, I've been doing this, and Getty has been doing this, I think, a little bit longer than I, for 25 years. And there's always more things, new ideas to learn. And I think that's what's so wonderful about the work that it keeps me going, keeps me really engaged. And I see Getty smile and just really enjoy the work that I do and that my team does. So.
Yeah. And I think also it's important for us to be open too, Lena, right? Because, we've been doing it for so long, so we think we know it all. And just like some researchers, they're on the level of knowing, what they're trying to study. But I think that's why they need folks like us to help them to, to have access to the community and to understand the community needs, right? So, yeah, this has been wonderful. Thank you all for your participation and sharing your ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we can chat among ourselves until the whole group comes back. I'm sure they're trying to get people in from the lunch tables. And I'm so glad that we're always able to do this hybrid, so that some of us can't always get into the site as easily as others. So glad to have you all on here.
I want to say, if I may, that we are continuously trying to recruit cancer survivors to discuss challenges that they face with software use. I know I met Terry in this context and she was extremely helpful. So thank you, Terry. If any of you would be comfortable sharing our study information, we're offering gift cards for participation. We're finding it very hard to recruit online with all the discussion of social media, because even closed Facebook groups seem to have a lot of bots on them. And when we post surveys online, we get a lot of answers that look like bad ChatGPT that see $10 gift card and answer. We got over 1,000 responses to our survey, and only about 50 of them were seem to be legitimate. But if any of you would be open to sharing our information with,
Devora, if you email it to either particularly Tatiana or Asher, or any of us, we can get it out. We send out information on our COE listserv very regularly, so we can probably get that posted.
Do you have an email address that you could share in the chat? That I would love to follow up on that.
Natalie, could you put mine in the chat, because I can't talk and chat at the same time. So Terry just asked again. Oh, Getty's putting in her title. Why don't you speak at Getty, and then I'll speak mine.
Sure. I'm the Director of Community Health and Outreach at the Institute for Family Health. We're a network of health centers, federally qualified health centers. I'm also a clinical social worker, and I'm a faculty member of the Family Medicine Residency Training Program at Harlem, working with the residents to help them learn about the community and how to engage and help the community, basically.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm actually a professor in the Department of Population Health Sciences and Policy, and have been doing community outreach, and the director of the Office of Community Outreach and Engagement for the Tisch Cancer Institute. And another very important project, besides the research that I do, is I also direct. We have a direct access colon cancer screening program, where patients can bypass the GI visit if they're generally healthy and can go directly to colonoscopy. And so that's, thank you, Natalie. That's a really wonderful, wonderful program. We receive about 250 referrals per week, and get them through and get them scheduled and such. So that's the other, and that grew out of research that I've done for the past 20 years. So that's very important to me. Thank you, Getty. And again, thank you all. Any last questions?
Or thoughts?
Or thoughts, or we can take a bio break, as they say.
Yeah, I have one more thought, super quickly on community outreach. Something that I've found particularly helpful is like right before I start presenting on whatever it is I'm presenting on, whether it's cancer, clinical trials, et cetera, advanced care planning. Those are like the three main things that I and my team present on. I, sometimes start with just like a quick story or why this information is important outside of just like individual health. I think I've been talking a little bit about family involvement this conversation, and I think it's really important to mention how it's not just your health that's important, it's your health in respect to your family, friends, and just general loved ones in your community. Because, for example, a lot of men, when I'm talking about prostate cancer, they talk about how important it is for them to be providing, and they hesitate to go to the doctor because they don't want to seem like they can't be a provider or whatnot. But how can you be a provider if you are sick, or even worse, you've passed away? You're leaving your friends and family, your community behind if something happens to you, right? And so I'm talk about, it's important for you to get your PSA blood test now, and make sure you have your health essentially on lock before you find out that there's something wrong months or years later because you didn't get that screening. So it's like, which scenario do you want to pick? Do you want to find it within yourself to go to the doctor first, or and it might be a little uncomfortable, or do you want to feel a lot of discomfort later when hopefully not, it doesn't happen, but you find out that you have something wrong, right? Or you have a health issue later down the line that you didn't address because you didn't want to go to the doctor. So it's important to really remind, patients, community members, et cetera, that, their health is important to them, of course, but it's also important to everyone in their life, especially those who rely on that individual as well. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Natalie, like to help personalize it for them, like what the impact of their health and, God forbid, their loss would be on their loved ones and their community, right? So, and you also shared the story about your grandma. I think, those personal kind of stories really hit home for community members. I've noticed that, when I share personal stories like that, or stories of other patients that I've worked with, right? That they really make a difference. People can really hear those instead of just giving a presentation on a particular, cancer or, right? So yeah, that's really, really helpful. Thank you for sharing that. Well, I hope they didn't forget about us,
I was just
Lena.
going to say that. I'm just trying to think who I can text. Oh, I know. I can text Allison. Let me see what's going on in the room there.
For us that are doing this work in the community, it really is important to find out or figure out how we can reach community members. You know what? There was one question about, getting colon cancer screening at a younger age. And things are changing. Things are changing in terms of our health and how it's impacting people, especially younger people. And so whatever we find that works, let's go for it, and let's try to share with each other, because if you find a way that's impactful or that really like helps you to connect with a particular community or a particular age group, all of us that are out there trying to help may benefit from learning about it. So that might be something else, that we might look into. How can we share with each other, right? I mean, obviously within Mount Sinai, you can all find a way to do that, but what about folks outside of Sinai that are trying to improve the health of the community or trying to get people to get their, colonoscopies or their mammograms, right? Let's share with each other. We're all out there trying to do the same thing, right? We all are invested in trying to help the health of our communities that we're serving. So, yeah, let's keep that in mind.
I'm trying to just text people I know who are in the room.
So I have interest in cancer survivorship care. There are new national guidelines that came out in April, and I wonder if all persons who've been treated for early stage cancer are actually receiving, cancer survivorship focused care after they complete their active treatment. So I think that's an area that needs some attention as well.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point, Nancy. I am a cancer survivor. I had renal cancer at a very early stage, but no one ever asked me, if I needed support or if would I want to, join a group or learn more about, my illness or even how to stay healthy and prevent my, from getting worse, right? So that's a wonderful point. Can you share more information maybe in the chat or send it to Lena or myself? I'll put my
Well, I'm actually, as I said in the beginning, I'm trying to find a space for a person who's an experienced clinician and a novice researcher, and I think a hybrid role of seeing patients and also developing, survive. I work in Chelsea. I think there's room for for cancer survivorship development there. I think there's room for training our primary care providers to feel more comfortable sort of with that handoff. Like I said, there's these new guidelines. So it's something that I'm just sort of thinking about how can I help with this area. So I don't have anything to offer you that's ready to go, but certainly an area where I think there's a gap, where I think there's a need. And so I raised my hand.
Thank you. I just got a message that the lunch line was long, so they're just coming back into the room now.
And I shared my email in the chat in case anyone wants to.
Yep, and I think I just put my one in.
But in reality, I mean.
So, obviously I'm
They can hear us,
interested
right? You can hear us on Zoom, correct? One sec. Hello? Yes, they can hear us. Okay.
Do you want them to go first?
They can, it's up to you. It's all up to you.
Oh, okay.
You guys want them to go first?
Logistically, would that be easy?
Yeah, because then they can mute and then we get everything up.
So it sounds like they're coming back into the room, so.
I should wait a second.
All right, is that Allison at the podium?
All right, hello again, everyone. Hope you enjoyed your lunch discussions. We'll now be reporting back from our discussion groups. We will have one person from each group recap the main points and themes discussed, along with any follow-up actions that your group came up with. Kindly keep your responses to 2 minutes because we're hoping to end on time. So we can start with engaging men in mental health. Do we have somebody to share? Oh, Zoom group can go first.
Oh, okay. Well,
Sorry.
that kind of caught me off guard. Trying to do this in 2 minutes. We had an absolutely wonderful group discussion. We talked about outreach methods, some really wonderful suggestions, including reaching out to local community advisory board, the different city council groups, interacting and connecting with community leaders, as an inroad into different communities. And as Dr. Parsons said, we have to leave the ivory tower. We have to go out to the community and meet people where they are. And the mobile prostate van was an excellent example of that. Under media, I learned about different platforms that different, I guess, social media platforms that different maybe age cohorts use, including maybe having some short videos, which I know we've done on Twitter. But also, as far as technology to meet older people, maybe it's at the libraries and or senior centers. And then the important question about sustainability, it really is keeping the word out there, meeting people where they are. Community local newspapers came up. And a final kind of addition to, which I think is really important, the issues of fear, medical mistrust, and stigma, language barriers in Black, Brown, other minority communities, really educating the providers to be culturally aware and culturally sensitive, including to issues such as collective as well as individual trauma. And Allison, I hope I did that in my 2 minutes.
You did great. Thank you so much. We will now pivot to the first group, engaging men in mental health. So we have somebody to summarize. Come on. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ryan Dritz, and me and John Claude, we had a great discussion on engaging men in mental health. The first thing that we acknowledged is that there is a stigma. There's a societal expectation that men suppress their feelings. So then when you introduce illness, how do those two things play against each other? And we talked about how we're at the hospital or our various locations, that we have resources, we have network, we have community, but we lack the engagement. And we're brainstorming ways of how to increase that engagement while acknowledging cultural differences. Maybe that's not the same languages for depression or anxiety or exhaustion. Different ways how we can try to connect to them with, if it's sports, if it's music. Sometimes it's just a challenge just to get the conversation going. I know one of the words that we used was just to nudge them a little bit. And we also discussed a little bit about how in our group, we have social work interns who will be carrying the torch, if you will, and assisting men in the future to engage a little bit more. And I share just my point of view that in the last 10, 15 years, we've watched, especially in the medical setting, men who don't want to talk about mental health or depression or suicide or substance use, to now having a little more opportunity, more access to therapy and opportunities now. So we're looking forward to seeing what we can do in the next 10, 15 years. And we ended it that there is hope.
Thank you so much. Group number 2, innovative approaches to cancer screening.
Yeah, we had a nice discussion about our one-stop shop approach to cancer screening. And I think one of the main takeaways is that building trust with communities takes time, and that within Sinai and the Tisch Cancer Institute itself, there's all of these initiatives that are already happening. But perhaps one of the approaches that we need to think about is doing a better job of identifying what's happening and collaborating and making sure that we are know about these various different initiatives to be able to share them with community members. And then the other point I wanted to just really quickly touch on was that are there ways that we can do a better job of identifying the touch points where it is most optimal to intervene with community members to serve their needs? So it isn't always about health related needs or even cancer, because we're dealing with whole people, and thinking about different opportunities to kind of engage and interact with people.
Thank you. I think we're up to 3, expanding cancer education to younger generations.
Hi. So I'm feeding back from our wonderful group. So Tanisha Hill and I co-facilitated, and we were talking really about cancer education. So we talked about the importance of really kind of outreaching to younger communities. Cancer is a fact of life. It's going to touch everyone at some point. And we talked about early exposure and transparency and making sure that kids can really be engaged. We talked about making sure that materials were designed for children at a developmentally appropriate level for them. And we talked about how, really this importance of systemic change in our communities and in our culture, and how you only do that by engaging the youth and breaking these generational cycles of health equity and health disparities. We spent a lot of time talking about social media and how we do digital outreach to kids and to younger people. We had some great Gen Zs in our group who were able to talk to TikTok, and the importance of making sure that we are not only creating content and helping people to outreach to communities, but that we're making sure those communities have critical thinking skills, digital literacy, are able to engage with social media in a way where they can discern what's real and what's not real, what carries real weight and value and what doesn't. And so we talked about making it cool, engaging kids in helping us to develop content, bringing them to the table, making sure we're doing focus groups and outreach and engagement, and giving voice and empowering children to drive content, to teach others, to have peer-to-peer influence, and to help our communities here at Mount Sinai, so our researchers, our doctors, our healthcare workers, to outreach to kids in a way that makes sense to them. Gen Zers, stay on too, and new volunteer group. Absolutely, they're in.
Thank you. I think we volunteered some of them already. Okay, number 4, group 4, how to become a research advocate.
So we actually have 4 of us. We'll try to be fast.
Okay.
From the individual to the dissemination perspective. Yes. Cindy, you can feel free to start talking.
Yeah, we really don't listen too well. So, but I kind of looking at who's coming up, it kind of gives you the idea of what a research advocate is. So I think I'll start defining what is a research advocate. And you hear the word advocate, patient advocate a lot, but a research advocate is a patient like myself who very much is involved in the research aspect. And we are a liaison between the research community and the actual patient community. So in the research side, we are patients who from the very beginning will look at protocols and look at the development, read ICFs, maybe be part of an IRB. We will do things like that along the way. We read your grant applications and score your grant applications. So that's the research part. But then we go back to the community. And we try to tell the community why research is important and what it is and why to engage in clinical trials, but make it in a very, very patient-friendly way. And this is how we can incorporate maybe some of our, community educators in that part. So a research advocate is a very unique type of individual that has one hand in the research and one hand in the community. And they'll talk more about that now.
Thank you, Cindy. So my part, Cindy's been here for a long time, and I'm very, very recent. Melissa and Tatiana, they sort of helped me get into this whole group. So I'd like to talk about a recent experience. I think that'll give you a very good idea of what a research sort of advocate can be. Dr. Max Doherty is putting in a research grant for a very rare blood cancer. That's myelodysplastic syndrome. So I'm very, very eager to work with him right from the beginning, putting in a grant. Hopefully he gets the grant and we can work on something together. And this is going to be quite a learning from ground up, who are the patients, what are the samples, how do you get the data, how do you do the clinical trials? So many things that I think is very, very exciting. You can be part of research, right? Basic fundamental research, and then you can together with Cindy and others, communicate how things are progressing to the larger community. So I think, as Cindy put it, it's you have research on one hand and you have the community on the other hand, and that's what we do. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm one of the health educators here at the Tisch Institute, and I just wanted to highlight how patient advocacy research can also benefit from our health education kind of like efforts. For example, I believe that patient advocates, they can leverage those community networks that health educators already have in place. And also kind of like just go maybe join our presentations, join our efforts in the community, and kind of like provide and share their lived experiences with the community and help them navigate care options or maybe screening options. Just kind of like maybe remove all the myth, kind of like demystify everything that's related to cancer care and yeah, treatment.
Hi, everyone. I sit at the Center to Advance Palliative Care, which is a national entity that basically helps palliative care providers to understand pain management strategies and all of that. And so in hearing the conversations at our table, it really dawned on me the fact that, you know, as a national hub, we could be highlighting exemplars when community scientists are a part of the conversations at the onset. And so just thinking about CAPC's like power is like disseminating and highlighting these type of interventions and these type of programming because they're so essential and have meaningful impact. And so it was a great discussion and I learned so much from my colleagues.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we're moving on to innovative and creative ways to cultivate community. Colette.
Hello, everyone. I think our group was uniquely dynamic, and we had a conversation that kind of deviated from the structure. However, I think we got at the heart of the matter. How do we make an attempt at exploring the issue of finding creative and innovative ways to cultivate community? At a really high level, one of the things that we thought about that was really important was to engage trusted members of the community. That's important, especially when there are some cultural barriers. It's important that that education and the encouragement to participate comes from trusted members of the community. We thought about engaging barbershops, beauticians, nail techs, and that was especially important in a space where there's often, our time is valuable and we often have competing priorities. So if we're there getting our hair done, we can listen to some very important information. A part of keeping those individuals in this space for the long haul is making sure those individuals feel valued, that they're compensated, and that we value their time by compensating them. One important question, though, that was brought up, I believe it was Dr. Smith mentioned, when a patient is in a space where they're in active treatment for a serious illness, it presents a different set of dynamics, and how do we navigate that space? I used my own example, my own experiences as an example, where I've made some mistakes, but ultimately I think I landed in a space where I'm comfortable, a space that allows me to be passionate about cancer care. And it really is about finding the organizations that specifically deal with your specific illness and testing them out. How does this work for me? And if it doesn't work for you, ask around, ask your tribe, ask your physicians for recommendations. And those are the two areas that we explored. Thank you for your time.
Okay, last but not least, the role of faith and faith-based communities in cancer.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Pastor Mimsy Robinson. I had the privilege of working with Reverend Dr. Serena Costello, who is here at Mount Sinai. We had Our Dr. Parsons with us in our group, along with 3 wonderful sisters. And we talked about a number of things that have to do with how faith-based organizations can support cancer patients and their families. We said certainly by prayer, certainly by the things that you traditionally expect. But we spoke of a number of other things, support groups. These are wonderful. And our own Chaplain Travis is here, who we'll hear from her a little bit later. But I think there's a need for that kind of thing in the churches. We're even trying to put that together. Health ministries, many of them already are formed, but there are many churches that don't have them. So support can be offered to them. When we looked at the issue of just how one might deal with the stigma around cancer, it's a big deal. And definitely for many people of faith, there are those who, again, by reason of their belief, might have some qualms about how to navigate such a situation, whether to do so publicly or privately is a real big issue. In our congregation, Bethel Gospel Assembly, which again, we had 2 sisters from my church with us at the table, our first lady, as we call them, this is the senior pastor's wife, she had breast cancer and was very public about it. And it really set a tone for allowing people to be honest, to be transparent, to be open about that kind of struggle, which is not an easy thing to do. You know, when there's a lot of uncertainty, of course, even when you get a lower stage. And so those things kind of cause a person might have a pause about sharing so publicly. But she's a fearless kind of woman, if you know her. And it set a tone for a congregation around health issues. We already had a health ministry that was active, but I think it got even more active and people became a little bit more interactive and proactive. So I could go on, but I know our time is up and I will stop there and simply say, we can always lend more support to these kinds of ministries within churches and other faith-based organizations. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for everybody for sharing. Now we're going to move to our panel for today, which is Patient Advocate Experience and Cultural Perspectives in Cancer. So I welcome Chaplain Travis Thomas, who is a cervical cancer survivor, a community oncology chaplain, one of our community scientists, and the president of Save for Life Cancer Corp. And then I'll invite our panelists as well, some of whom you've just heard from. So we have Colette Smith joining our panel. She is a lung cancer survivor, also a community scientist and a TCI CAB member. We have the Reverend Dr. Mimsy Robinson, associate pastor and TCI CAB member. We have Helen Sitt, cancer survivor and a manager for the Chinatown NORC at BNS Health and also a CAB member. And the Reverend Dr. Zarina Costello, Director of Community Engagement for the Center for Spirituality and Health. And turn it over to Travis. This.
That I help lead the Women to Women, Women of Color, Navigating Gynecological and Breast Cancer Support Group with Miss Rachel, as well as Miss Mary, and we're honored to be here. Thank you so much. And hello, panelists, looking beautiful today. I'm honored to actually be here with you. Y'all are all my heroes, you know that already, right? Okay, so as we go, let's just go down and have you introduce yourself. That would be great. Would you like to start?
Colette Smith, everyone. I am a 9-year lung cancer survivor and happy to be here.
Mimsy Robinson, as stated earlier, I serve as an associate pastor at Bethel Gospel Assembly. It's a church right here in the community at 120th Street between Madison and Fifth Avenue. And I've been involved in a number of community advisory boards, and one of those is that one for this particular institution, Tisch Cancer Institute.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Hear me, right? Hi, my name is Helen. I'm so honored to be here, and I'm so happy to see all the familiar faces because we are on Zoom most of the time. Now it's in person. Right? So I have two identities. I'm the social worker. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in the field for many years, but also at the same time, I'm a two-time cancer survivor. And thank God I'm here that I can use my professional knowledge and personal experience to better serve the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Reverend Dr. Zarina Costello. I am a chaplain with the Center for Spirituality and Health, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement for the Center for Spirituality and Health and the Center for Stress Resilience and Personal Growth, both with the Icahn School of Medicine. I was born in Harlem. I was raised up a few blocks from here in the projects on First Avenue and 105th. And just that alone has framed sort of my lifelong mission to work with community, and particularly working at Mount Sinai, which is something I never really anticipated, but it has brought many aspects of my ancestry, my family who immigrated from Puerto Rico back in the 1920s, and my upbringing here, and then later on in my life, a deeper commitment to my faith and service all around. So that's who I am.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Dr. Zarina. Okay, so let's start with the questions. Okay, this question is for Ms. Helen. What are your experiences with how cultural perspectives have impacted a person's cancer journey and their caregivers?
Yes. It's a very big question. I think I can use an hour, more than that, to talk about it. But let me make it simple. You know what? Nobody wants cancer. Cancer to us is like, Chinese culture. Cancer equal to death. No cure at all. This is strongly in our mind. And then when we got cancer, it's like not hypertension, not diabetes. It's something that you don't want anybody know about it. So at first, when I first diagnosed this, I said, how come? I want to win the lotto, not cancer. And I don't want anyone know about it except my boss, because I'm an independent worker, independent woman. And now suddenly I got cancer. That means I'm a patient and my role got changed from independent to dependent. Oh no, this is the end of the world. And I don't want people think I will bother them, even my family. But however, this is something that also when I look through that, this is not a good thing because no support, no survive. All the cancer treatment, I think in this auditorium, a lot of them do you mind say you have cancer, you're a cancer survivor? Yes. So you know that. Thank you for your hand. I love you. It's hard. When you go through all the surgery, radiation, chemotherapy, with no family support, no friend support, I'm not here. So it's very important. So the cultural thing makes the therapy or treatment difficult because some of the Chinese patients or other from other ways that they stop, they don't want to talk about it, they want to hide, they may delay the treatment, or the other thing is like they don't trust the Western medicine. They will go to find their herbal medicine, something that, suppose you find on YouTube, or the natural remedy. holy moly. But you know, because of the language barrier too, they won't talk to their physician. They don't talk to their the surgeon. So they don't know. I mean, it's like an obstacle. The surgeon say, how come my treatment is not effective? And then finally they find out because the patient using a lot of Chinese herbal medicine that may have a side effect or, you know, counter effect with the regular treatment. So the cultural thing is really, some of them is not a good thing. So as a provider, healthcare provider, you got to understand where does the patient come from and what's the belief. Try to engage them, talk more about their worries, their thinking, their background in order to provide the best treatment. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. As a 3-time cancer survivor, pregnant twice, we relating. We can relate, definitely. Thank you so much for sharing that.
We survive.
Yes, still surviving, right? Colette, would you like to answer that question as well? You want me to read it over again?
I
Okay.
believe I have it.
You got it? Okay.
I'm from a tiny island in the Caribbean, Antigua, 365 beaches. And culturally, we have certain beliefs that ultimately can impact treatment, especially as it pertains to cancer. A physician to us is like someone next to God. We never question our physicians. And so when a physician says, this is your treatment plan, this is the medication, we walk away. Even though we may have questions, we walk away saying nothing. And oftentimes the trajectory would be that we would suffer greatly because we would, after we started taking the medication, we feel better, we stop. We turn to herbal remedies, and what herbal remedies cannot fix, we have a huge Rastafarian community. Marijuana will take care of the rest. Yes. The other thing is, cancer is looked at as a taboo. It's not anything to be spoken of. And sometimes there's a family health history that we may not be aware of because it's always hush hush. And some of the other things that may affect us culturally is access to care. We have one major hospital that serves a population of over 200,000 and a mental health institution for everyone else. So for me personally, though, as a survivor, I broke that cycle and I stepped away from that. I challenge everything. I'm very involved with my healthcare. My husband, who's also a survivor, who's Antiguan also, we are at opposite ends of the spectrum. And thankfully he has me, so I drag him along kicking and screaming. So, and I'm always going to push back. It's never a sign of being disrespectful or unappreciative. It's just that I want to play an important part in my healthcare. And I want to feel like it's a partnership. And I have the right as a patient to question certain things and to get my physicians involved and to ask many, many questions. That's been my experience.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Reverend Dr. Zarina, what are ways that we well-meaning institutions like Mount Sinai help to make patient advocacy accessible for all patients?
I really think that as providers and as researchers, we should all be trained in patient advocacy. So one of the things I think about is an experience I had in my master's program where we were assigned to go out into the community and have an experience with someone from a group that people normally don't see. So one of our classmates was in a wheelchair. She had MS. And so we had to take public transportation. I was in Maryland at the time. Public transportation, we decided to go to Washington, D.C., to the Museum of the American Indian. And just living that experience with her, trying to take public transportation was a task. If we don't experience what the community folks experience, the patients experience, How can we have that lived experience? We can't get it from books. We can't get it from Zoom meetings. We have to go out into the community in order to become an advocate. We have to have some experience on a community-based level that engages us with the community face to face in the community. Another way is, of course, which I think Mount Sinai is growing in doing patient navigation. So patient navigators, just because of what they do, become advocates for the patient. You get to know the patient, you get to know what their needs are, you get to discuss their social determinants of health. And in that way, you're going to be helping to make, not just for the patient navigators, but for all of us, you're going to be helping to make referrals to other providers, other resources in the community, and that is advocacy. So it's listening, it's using your resources, whatever you know, whatever your colleagues might know, to advocate for this patient. And I think that we can all grow in that field. We're somewhat siloed sometimes in the work that we do. But as we expand our base of knowledge, as we explore the lived experience of our patient communities, I think we'll become better advocates along the way.
Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Zarina. Can I have raise your hand if you know what a patient navigator is, please? Okay, very good, very good. Okay. For those who don't know, patient navigators help break down the barriers to timely cancer care. Please look that up and research it if you're not aware of it. Thank you. Reverend Dr. Robinson, this is for you. What is the importance of acknowledging individuals' belief system, and how can we ensure that the healthcare system is sensitive to those realities?
Extremely important, first of all, to answer it quickly. But that said, I like the way the question is phrased because it says individuals. There are some times when we can easily stereotype a person based on whether it's their faith, whether it's their background racially or ethnically. But each of us have so many influences that help us make these decisions, especially when you're under the gun. Serious pressurized moments such as one dealing with cancer or some other adversity. So I think of my aunt. I have an aunt who has since passed away, and she, upon finding out about her cancer diagnosis, which she never told me what stage it was or anything like that, but I knew that from the way she was operating, it was probably, stage 4. So that said, she did a number of things that kind of helped inform me just on how unique a person's choices might be, but also sometimes we're often encouraging people to, kind of show us how to live. But she's a person who kind of showed me how to die. And I think that's an odd statement, but in this context probably isn't. Learning how to come to terms with something that's not pleasant, yet being pleasant while doing it. All right. And that's something that she illustrated, I think, wonderfully. She did, shortly after getting that diagnosis, she gave up her apartment, or, began the process for giving up her apartment, moved into a hospice. At the time, was a single woman. She began to work on her end of life issues, even down to the specifics of the funeral, which she wanted me to perform. She, even left a wonderful card with a gift, believe it or not. Not that I was looking for one, but that was just who she was. That was how she was. And it was extremely informative. And I would just say I'll never forget it. But it spoke of just how individual a person might be. There are many others. I mean, we could be in the same church, have the same belief system, and still have very different ways of dealing with something like this. And so the idea of a spiritual assessment, I happen to see that as one of the questions. I think it's wonderful because at the end of the day, spiritual, mental, emotional, financial, all of these things come in, cultural, all the issues of life come to bear on moments like that. And we need to, if I can speak to the institution needs to really take time to become educated about all of that and find out how to best serve this person in keeping with their own convictions and desires. I'll stop.
Thank you so much, Reverend. Appreciate that. Reverend Dr. Zarina, how can researchers include spiritual assessment in patient care?
So there are many different types of models of spiritual assessment tools. I'm going to just talk about one briefly right now. And this model comes from one of our colleagues at George Washington University. It's called the FICA Spiritual Assessment. And it's an acronym for faith, belief, meaning for the F. The I is importance and influence. C is community. And A is address, assessment, and plan. So when you're assessing for faith, there are several questions that you could ask. Do you consider yourself to be spiritual? Do you have spiritual beliefs, practices, or values that help you cope with stress, difficult times, or with whatever you're going through? And in a sense, I want to say that although we're talking about faith, our patients, are on a range. Some of them may not consider themselves spiritual. They may say they're agnostic, or they may say they're an atheist, but fundamentally, they're operating out of some type of belief system that's either helping them cope better or preventing them from coping. But we want to be able to ask those questions. And in order to be able to do that, we have to learn to be comfortable with those questions. So we should test them out on ourselves first, because if you can't have a conversation with yourself about your own belief system or your own faith system, how could you have it with someone else? So we come to the I, importance and influence. What importance does spirituality have in your life? Has your spirituality influenced you in how you take care of yourself, your health, and in your healthcare decision making? So that's the importance and influence. And we want to be able to engage that conversation, because it's going to be really important for not only for the patient to reflect on it, but for us to be in partnership with the patient in how to reflect on that. And the C is for community. Are you a part of a spiritual or religious community? And, studies have been done that being part of a community and a faith community is preventative. So having those connections, and I'm sure Reverend Robinson can attest to this, it makes people feel that they are part of something larger than themselves. It helps them feel connected, and it helps them to know that they're not alone. So are you a part of a spiritual or religious community? Is this of support to you, and how? And get the patient to talk about this. Is there a group of people you really love who are important to you? And it's interesting to see how people respond, particularly when patients are in the hospital. Some of them are really isolated. Some of them used to belong to a faith community. They got sick. They're no longer able to go. Does anyone reach out to them? Sometimes pastors change. When the pastor leaves or the faith leader leaves, sometimes those people get lost in the mix. No one visits them anymore. No one calls them. No one sends them cards. So is this group of people important to you, and are you still connected with them? Communities such as churches, temples, mosques, like-minded friends and families can serve as a support system for some patients. For other patients, it may be connections to others if they, for example, coming from a nursing home into the hospital. So whatever group they identify, we want to emphasize to them how important that group is, because it gives them a sense of belonging. And then the A in FICA is address and have an assessment and a plan, which you do in partnership with the patient. How should the healthcare provider address these issues in your healthcare? Does the patient need a referral? And of course, because of HIPAA, we can't give out their names to any organizations, but we can give them the information to make a phone call so that they can be in touch with the organization. So to other chaplains, to clergy, and other spiritual care providers. So this is a quick run of an assessment. There are others, you can look them up online. There are many, many other spiritual assessments. But this one in particular is short, it's brief, and it's easy to learn. So that's why I am suggesting it today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
ACS did a study a while back where they said that 69% of those people who found faith found hope. So without hope, what can happen without having that hope. So thank you so much for definitely sharing that great information.
You're welcome.
Ms. Howland, can you answer this question? How can patient advocates help to make sustainable changes in healthcare and beyond?
Before I answer that question, I want to add one more point on the cultural thing. Maybe this it always bothered me. Tell or not tell. So, as a healthcare provider, you may encounter that, especially Chinese families, the patient, suppose, the provider should tell the patient, okay, what's going on with your body? What's your diagnosis? However, in Chinese family, they will say, I'm the caregiver, tell me before you talk to the patient. So if they diagnose cancer, they may ask the provider, please don't tell my mom about that. No, please keep it a secret. And then they will say, why? They have the right to know their diagnosis. No, if you tell them, then you jeopardize the whole thing. You will make her health more serious, make her emotions worse, a lot of negative impact, and it will not do any good on her. However, as a social worker, no, if you don't tell her the truth, what happens if it's like an end stage? So the patient has the right to know this is the end of my life. So I still have my bucket list. I need to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10. But if you just hide this fact from her, so this is something, it's a dilemma. Always encounter. For me, I would like the truth, but I talk to a lot of our patients and family caregivers. They said, no, please don't, So I just want to raise that question to the audience, what can you do if the family require you to keep the secret? That's a dilemma. And then, to answer your question, what do I advocate? Say again your question. Sorry. I want to advocate a lot of things.
It's okay. How can patient advocates help to make sustainable changes in healthcare and beyond?
I think, as a patient, I think, listen to me, tell me, tell me more options, Just like the other panelists say, sometimes the doctor is, to us, is higher up. So whatever they say, we'll do, yes. But I have the right to know more options, treatment 1, 2, 3, 4. What is the pros and cons? And then help me to make the right decision instead of just, give me one choice. There's no more choice, or you make the decision for me. This is the best one for you. You should keep this. No, I want to know more. So if I'm the patient, I would like you to understand what I need, listen to me, and then help me to make the right choice instead of just let me follow your instructions.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. So this last question is for each of you. What is one piece of advice that you would give to people who want to advocate for themselves? Would you like to start?
I can certainly start. I would say have a plan. I'm a planner, develop a plan. And this plan can certainly change over time. But just know that you are the caretaker of your plan. You can hire physicians and clinicians and you can fire them if it's not working for you. You can get second and third opinions. I've certainly done it. But it's important to have a plan. Have a plan.
Right. I would, I would just add, not only are you advocating for yourself, but you're advocating for your family, you're advocating for your community. When you express your position, your thoughts, your ideas, I have been somewhat surprised by how well received some of the things I've shared in the context of community advisory boards and the likes has been. Because I'm like, well, I didn't go to medical school and all these things, but it so happens they're more interested in hearing your viewpoint than you might think. And you often will have something that might be kind of grassroots or right on the ground in a way that they really needed it. So I just say, it's for you for sure, but it's also for so many others when you are vocal and bold.
Thank you, sir.
My turn. Okay. So one word, never give up. Seek help. Don't be isolate yourself if you are the patient. There's a lot of resources. And cancer is not the end. Look at us. We are here, And, I have a dream. I like that. I have a dream. I always think, if everybody can talk about cancer, like hypertension, arthritis, the common disease, that will be easier for everybody to work on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
In one of the projects that I facilitate, Health Through Early Awareness Learning, when we do training with our community health advisors, we tell them when they're working with their community or with their congregations to tell people it's okay for them to write questions down before they see a provider. When a patient gets into an office or into a care facility, sometimes they get nervous and they meant to ask something and they leave there and they never asked what they wanted to ask. They become overwhelmed with the information that the provider is giving to them. And it's always good to write things down. And if you can, bring someone with you, someone from your family, someone from the community, bring Travis. Because we need support. So yes, there's such a thing as self-advocacy, but we do better when we're in community. We do better when we have someone with us that cares about us and that's going to remind us, hey, didn't you want to ask that question? Not that they're going to take over, but we empower them to remind us, to give us, and they give us strength. So how do we advocate for ourselves? Because it happens to me too. Then I have to call the doctor's office back and say, I forgot to ask a question. Oh, well, she'll call you back later, or he'll call you back later. And then you're waiting and kicking yourself because you didn't ask the question that you wanted to ask in the moment. So yeah, write things down, take someone with you. Also pray. Prayer is very important. Prayer strengthens you to advocate for yourself.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Zarina. She trained me to be a community advisor too. Great program, great program. So let's go to the.
Let me just add one more
Yes.
thing. I'm reminded, I think you just mentioned it, that when we advocate for ourselves, we're advocating for our family members and others around us. And that's important. I have a little quick story to tell. 1977, back in the Virgin Islands, Bob Marley's Exodus album dropped. I'm aging myself. And one of the tracks on that album was So Much Things to Say. And there's a refrain that says, when the rain falls, it doesn't fall on one man's housetop. And however old I was, I interpreted it to mean that, I don't know, some crazy thing, but he could have been talking about health inequities and maybe the cancer that ultimately took his life. Or what I think he was saying holistically was that when one suffers, we all suffer. So I say empathy is really, really important. And that's really a call to action for us to be a little more empathetic, listen more, and listen to some Bob Marley.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I believe we might have questions in the Zoom. Okay. Okay.
Audience questions, we can take like one.
Any one question? No? Come on, y'all. I know you got something.
Cups are
Okay.
filled.
So let me just say thank you so much, panelists. You are amazing. Can we give them a hand, please? Thank you. Thank you. They are phenomenal. I did notice when the audience was asked, does anyone have cancer or a cancer survivor in this audience? Did everybody understand what she said when she said that? Is there any cancer survivors in this audience?
Yep, so a few hands go up.
Yep. 3 or 4. Okay, 5 actually. Okay. I did 26 years in nursing. Okay. And so cancer was always over there at the job. It wasn't with me. It was at the building. And then when I got cancer, it was at home. It got real fast. So just remember and be so grateful that it's not you today. And I pray that it's not anyone that you know or you love, but know tomorrow and years from now, this information may be geared towards you and somebody you care about. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Transition to our vocal ensemble.
I guess we can leave.
All right, well. Got it, sorry. Okay, while they're setting up, this is our vocal ensemble. It's facilitated by Michael Ng. They meet usually over Zoom on Mondays. And we have 2 members. I think some of them were not feeling well today. So we only have 2 members of our vocal ensemble, but we're really happy to have them here. Do you need me to move?
Well, we originally had some other music planned today, and then some of our group couldn't make it. We usually have more folks than this. We are usually on Zoom, and every now and then we have the opportunity to do something in person, which is wonderful. And in shifting gears, I asked Mary Ann here if she would share a song. In addition to the vocal group that we do, about 2 or 3 times a year, we have a songwriting workshop. And that's one of my favorite things, where we get to dive into expression in writing original music. And this is a song Mary Ann created. And I asked her if she would be willing to share that today. So this is what we're shifting gears with. I'll let you tell a little about it if you want, real quick, before we do.
Is this, you can hear me? The singing group started after I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I wanted to do something. I wanted to be in community. I wanted to be with other people, but I didn't want to talk about the disease. I wanted to do something uplifting. And Michael and I started the group, and it did everything I wanted to do. There's nothing like harmonizing with other people and singing. It was fantastic. And then as the group went on, we did some of the songwriting workshops. And this is a moment in time, the song. This is how I felt. And we put this together. And this is the song I wrote with Michael. So I encourage you all to join our singing group or sing. Can I just hold it? This is Orietta. She's going to sing too. Just hold it. Okay. I got the news today that there's something very wrong. My world came to a sudden stop and I was all alone. Tell me something good, that it's gonna be all right. Tell me it's not the end, that I still have to fight. No more sitting in a small cafe, laughing with a friend. Dreams on hold. No more travel plans to see the world. The pyramids will have to wait. Dreams on hold. The only dream I have is to live. Don't mean to be dramatic, but this is my reality. I've lost control of my destiny. It's no longer up to me. Tell me something good, that it's gonna be all right. Tell me it's not the end. I still have to fight. No more sitting in a small cafe, laughing with a friend. Dreams on hold. No more travel plans to see the world. The pyramids will have to wait. Dreams on hold. The only dream I have is to live. The only dream I have is to live. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. They're our vocal ensemble led by Michael Ng. Okay, as we're coming to an end of our retreat, we would like you all to fill out a quick survey. We greatly value community input and would love to get feedback on how we could improve next year's retreat. So you can scan this QR code on the screen by opening your camera on your phone and holding it up to the screen. Your phone should be able to scan the code and a link should pop up that will take you to our survey. It should take you less than 5 minutes to complete. As you're doing that, I want to invite Dr. Smith to say some final words. Before we end, Dr. Smith is the Chief Medical Officer for the Tisch Cancer Hospital, Vice President and Chief Quality Officer, Associate Director of our Community Outreach and Engagement Team. And she's also a Professor of Medicine in the Division of Hematology and Oncology in the Department of Geriatrics and Palliative Care. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Smith. We will also include, information about our COE cancer resources in another QR code. So after the survey, we will have another QR code if you want additional resources. So now I welcome Dr. Smith.
I'm just impressed. Allison got all of that out of her mouth, so kudos to her. So first of all, thank you all so very much for joining us and staying through today. As we approach the end of today's retreat, I really want to take a moment to extend my deepest gratitude to each of you for your participation and your energy, both here in the room with us and those of you participating virtually over Zoom. The dialogue we've shared throughout the day, whether it was during our discussions over lunch or through the really thoughtful questions that we had throughout the day, and the insights shared on our panels, really demonstrate the power of collaboration in advancing our shared mission of equitable cancer care. I know I've taken away some really incredible feedback from the panel discussions, from the keynote address that we had, and I think really some food for thought, things that I'm thinking about from my role in the Cancer Center is, how do we enhance the communication both within and externally, really to create and cultivate community. There's lots of really wonderful, innovative work that we're all doing together. And how do we make that known in the bigger, broader scale? We talked about shared power structures and how do we really use that in our approach to research so that we are democratizing this research process? And really, how do we move our action towards solutions? Here at the Tisch Cancer Center, we really want to move towards improvement. And so how do we start thinking about the conversations and the topics that we talked about today and turn them into action for tomorrow? I talk about it being Monday ready. And so from all of our wonderful 7 panels, I know that I'm going to expect to see a lot of Gen Zs all of the sudden volunteering for our work and our opportunities. That's the next thing that I'm going to want to see based on some of the conversations that we've had today. And I want to send a really special thank you to Dr. Snow for guiding us through today's program very diligently, Dr. Parsons for his leadership of the Cancer Center, our keynote speaker, Dr. Brosi, for her enlightening presentation. I know we all are no longer going to eat charred vegetables. That's right. And Dr. Miller for facilitating the discussion. I'd like to thank all of the panelists that we've just heard. And I'd like to thank all of the individuals who helped to facilitate our workshop discussions and for sharing their invaluable perspectives. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the most incredible performance we just heard from the Mount Sinai Patient Vocal Ensemble. So just a round of applause for everybody. One last. And a huge heartfelt thanks to the planning committee. I think I did nothing other than say yes when, the budget came across my email. And so for their tireless efforts in making this event seem incredibly seamless, it is not easy to pull off anything hybrid. Patrick, who's been running around behind the scenes doing tons of work, thank you. And to the COE team in particular, Melissa, Allison, Tatiana, Lena, Asher, thank you. This event could not be done without you. To our community advisory board, who are our partners in everything. Your time and dedication that you give to the Cancer Center and to the community means more than you know. And to Sharon and Christine, our administrative partners in this work for the Cancer Center. None of us would be here without that support. And so thank you to you as well. And before we officially wrap up, I encourage you, when you see the QR code, to come back up again to scan it and think about how you might get engaged more with our Cancer Center and our community outreach and engagement program. Remember, your input is invaluable to us. We really do use that to improve our programs and to think about better ways and other ways to engage with community. And so once again, thank you all for being here and for your commitment to making cancer care more inclusive and equitable for all communities. I look forward to the continued work we'll accomplish together. And I'll leave with a quote I heard from the Engaging Men in Mental Health group. There's hope. Have a wonderful rest of your day.